Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Was I muted this whole time?
Yeah, you're muted.
Yeah.
All right. Hello, families. African Esquire with the Federation of African Liberation. I'm sorry, I didn't know my mic was muted. But we're here to talk about some topics tonight. And before I get started, if anyone is interested in being a member of FAL, I'm going to put a link to our application inside of the chat, and I'm also going to pin one to a comment for the video after we're done with our live broadcast. So we have a number of topics we're going to talk about, but the first one we're going to talk about, since this is election week, and some of you might have seen already, I did a video on my thoughts on voting, what Black people, African Americans, what we should consider when we were thinking about voting, whether or not we should vote, whether or not there's power in voting. And so I really did a whole 40-minute video on that. So we're going to discuss that a little bit more. And we're going to start with Pierre X, who is the Minister of Self-Defense.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, my belief is for Blacks, there's no power in voting if we don't vote together, especially in national elections. I mean, I'm all for voting. Like, I'm not against voting. And there is a candidate who's going to who has your best interest in mind, then you should vote for them. But I don't think there's very much power in it if, as a people, we don't vote together. As far as voting, associating yourself party, I think, and counterproductive in every way, especially when that party, really meets any of your improvement. Still doesn't improve. Why would you be loyal to any particular party? That's really my thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of I seen an article. I think Jamal Brewer might have tagged me in it. Someone who's been a great supporter of mine. There was an article that Oprah was giving a speech, and she was saying how if you basically don't vote, that you're dishonoring our ancestors. And I'll always hate that argument, because one, it kind of makes it seem like our ancestors were only concerned with voting, but the real gist of what they were going for was to be treated humanely, to be treated as a whole person, to be treated with equality, whatever means gets them that. They weren't voting. They didn't want to vote just so that they could say, hey, I voted. They actually had a reason, because in their mind, that was a way to actually get to total freedom, total emancipation. So how do y'all feel whenever you hear people tell you, if you don't vote, you're going to be dishonoring your ancestors?
I remember Amos Wilson always made this point about voting. He said that African Americans didn't vote to get the right to vote. So my approach to voting has always been, we're always told to vote, and then people just that it's like you just you go there and you vote and you elect these politicians, and then you sit down and you don't do anything. And I would always argue that what's more important than voting is actually organizing and mobilizing the community, so that you're not just voting and electing people, but say, for example, you elect a politician, which more often than not this happens, you elect a politician who made all sorts of promises, and then they get in office and they're not fulfilling any of those promises. Well, what do you do next? You have to mobilize and put pressure on those people to take action. And the recent examples I use is when Obama was president, we saw police brutality under Obama, didn't change, it continued. But Obama only took action when the communities mobilized and protested. And in cases like Ferguson and Baltimore, there was rioting, and the rioting was followed by the Obama administration sending the Department of Justice to conduct investigations. Now, would those investigations have happened had it not been for the protesting and the rioting that was going on? So I always make the point with voting that we can't just vote and expect voting to be enough. History has shown that we only make progress through organization and mass mobilization. And that's the point that Oprah and a lot of these celebrities that push voting on us, they never really make the connection between the fact that the only reason why we have the right to vote is because of organization and mobilization.
Exactly, because it's like, they push voting, but they don't push other things that could equally lead to our liberation. So you'll get shamed if you don't vote, but you don't get shamed if you don't consciously try to spend money in the Black community, or you won't get shamed if you don't, pay attention to who you're actually voting for. That's the other thing, it's like, oh, vote, vote, vote. But a lot of people will vote straight ticket or they'll vote straight Democrat, and they're not really even looking into individual platforms. And a lot of times we have to understand the Democratic Party is just as racist foundationally, just as discriminatory against so-called African Americans. They have the same goal as far as self-preservation, and they will step on your rights if that is what will get them to that. So this idea that just voting and we're not going to actually make you organize around candidates, we're not going to actually tell you to do other things outside of voting. It's a silly argument. And to me, and I made this point, we've been doing the same thing for so long. And at some point we have to understand the way we've been doing things there has to be something wrong with what we're doing. There has to be something wrong with what is business as usual. And if we're going to just keep saying, okay, vote, 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 and we're not actually looking into why it hasn't worked in the past, why is it that we have one of the highest voter turnout rates as a community, but we are in the worst condition as a community? We are the most politically disenfranchised of any community, even, the Native American community that are most closely resembling as far as how they have been treated historically, but even they have some political gains that we don't have because we're not organized. So, Frank, do you have anything you want to add to this? Frank, you're muted.
Yeah, let me just add something quick, just maybe 1 minute or so. The question you asked, for me, I would say our people did not struggle for us to vote on it. That wasn't a message for our struggle. That wasn't a message to Malcolm X, W.E.B. Du Bois, Rosa Parks, Harriet. That wasn't a message for them. So when I see people like Oprah coming out telling Black people to vote, it's like telling us that voting in this country is the solution to Black struggle, to Black liberation. And that's why I say the only time they really give the credit to entertainer or to celebrity is whenever a celebrity come out to talk about voting. For example, if any other celebrity come out to talk about equality or injustices against Black people, you become a target. But when you come out to talk about voting, you become a hero. And that's why, like I was telling somebody, even with Obama, the only thing Obama have given to Black people, the only freedom Obama have given to Black people is to push voting. So like there are Black people on the street dying every day by police, by the same law. But you don't see Obama, who is in a position of power, you don't see him talking about anything of the injustices that go against Black people every day. But you see Obama 24/7 on TV or asking Black people to vote. You see it? And another thing Obama gave to Black people is he gave hope to Black people. Every time, hope, 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 hope. Hope that this will happen. Hope that they will change. But the question I always ask is, who is going to become the next Black president? It's going to be maybe after 4 or 5 decades before you can even get another one Black president, or maybe not even right now. So that's the only two things Obama have given to Black people: hope with nothing, at the same time asking people to vote. But yet instead, Black people are being fallen every day, and he don't talk about it. But he used Black people to give white people the power. That means to elect white people in power, and white people are using Obama to go around to campaign for Black votes. You see, and that is where we are Black people. We need to realize, not because there's a Black man out there that know how to speak, not because there's a Black man out there that have that charisma, that know how to encourage people, or know how to talk to people, to go do something, means that we should go. But we should ask ourselves, is he or she really doing what we need him or she to do? And, you know, but he's not doing it, and he come to us asking us for voting. You see a lot of people falling for it and going to vote. So to answer that question, voting is not a solution to Black struggle.
Let me add something as well before you move on.
Come again? Oh.
No, I was just going to say, but before you move on, I wanted to add something whenever you were finished.
Yeah, no, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done.
Oh, okay. I'm so glad you brought that up because, like, it really makes me sick to my stomach when you have Obama or a Black figure, a political figure, or a celebrity figure.
1 second. Frank, can you mute your mic? Okay.
Okay. I was saying, any type of, you know, prominent Black or celebrity figure that comes in and says, basically, you all have to vote, and when we don't vote, you're the reason why our conditions still the same. Like, it's just a slap in the face, and it's sickening. Like, it really makes me sick to my stomach. Obama, I've been wondering where Obama has been, like, through all of this. Basically, Chicago is in almost to a point, I thought, because of the violence and racism in the police department and so much. And Obama's been missing. As soon as it's time for the campaign trail, now we see Obama in Florida. We see Obama everywhere, telling Black people to vote. Like, it just makes me sick to my stomach. And John Lewis, if I have to watch him one more time get on stage and use the March in Selma and how he was beat down in Selma, if I see him use that one more time to try to shame Black people into voting, like, I'm going to throw up. I'm going to puke. Like, it's sickening. What is the point? Why do we keep voting for you? Why? Like, it doesn't even, it's not adding up. And this new generation is coming along is not going to buy it. Like they're going to, you know, we're not that dumb. Like, how long have it's been, how many years since the Battle of the Bullet? Over 50 years? And we still don't get it? Like, we still don't, is this the Matrix? Like, you can't vote your way out of slavery. Like, you just can't do that. It's like, I don't, it makes me sick because it's like, people see it, you know, the average person will see Obama and Oprah saying that, and they'll take it as in a way of, well, you know what, I do have the vote. You know, people died to vote, people bled, people, you know, which is true. But like you said, where's the accountability for everything else? Like, you say we're accountable for not voting. Like, where's your accountability for not against police violence, Obama? Where's your accountability, Oprah, for not speaking out against anything? Like, you know, they're in no place to look at us and point and say, well, you have to vote, and you can't complain. That's the one that drives me nuts the most. If you don't vote, you don't have a say, so you can't say anything. Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's all propaganda, like, to try to get us to buy into the system. That's what I really think it is fundamentally. And I definitely agree with everything. You know, to me, the most disrespectful thing about Obama is that he literally did nothing for Black people the 8 years he was in the presidency, but still has the goal to feel like he could still tell us, you know, this is what you should do, this is what's best for you. And that's like, you know, that's like him going to, you know, the Republicans, to me, and telling them this is what you should do, because you didn't treat us like we were your constituency. You basically treat us like, okay, well, like the Democrats always treat us, which is that you're basically just here to vote for me because I'm going to give you some type of moral reason to vote for me, but I'm not going to give you a tangible reason. I'm not going to give you any gains. So, you know, with he to me should be the quintessential example to us of the issues with this narrative that has been built around voting. This narrative has been built that if you vote, if you don't vote, you don't have a say, or if you vote, you can change the way that things go. If you don't vote, you know, this is what's going to happen. And what we did is we all came out for President Obama. He had a majority in the Senate and in the Congress, and it was a Black president. And if that is what voting gets us, what did we get with him? He was too scared to actually do anything for Black people. So that whole narrative that we need Black politicians, we need to make sure that we're represented. Well, when we actually did have a Black face in the presidency, the excuse became, well, you know, he doesn't want to row all these white people. He doesn't want to seem too pro-Black. He didn't mind looking too pro-woman. He didn't mind looking too pro-gay. He didn't mind looking too pro-Latino. He didn't mind looking too pro-anything. But when it came to Black people, it was, well, you're too pro-Black. You don't want to be too pro-Black, so, you know, don't take any definitive action. And a funny thing, you know, last thing I'll say about him is that I remember very early on in his administration, he did something that was supposed to look and appear to be something for the Black community. As I'm sure everyone knows, the disparity between crack cocaine and powder crack and powder cocaine is so different. And we know historically it's because crack is more associated with Africans, whereas powder cocaine is more associated with Europeans. And you know, there's all these headlines saying that Obama lowers the disparity between crack cocaine and powder cocaine, but he actually didn't lower the sentences for crack. He only increased the ones for cocaine, and he didn't even make them equal. So no one was getting out of jail for their crack cocaine convictions. It was something to make it appear that he was doing something for the Black community. And that's what Democrats get away with all the time. They do things that are symbolic. They do things that are supposed to look like it's for us. And because it looks like it, you know, you have people like Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton jumping up and down saying, look, we're getting something. But we're still in the same condition we are in today, because to me, if anything that's being done doesn't affect power for the Black community, if we're not getting any power, then all that stuff is just symbolic. And until we're actually asking for things that will actually give us power, then all these things are only given to us to make it look like they're doing stuff for us and to give us this image that the Democratic Party is for Black people. But in reality, we have to focus on organizing ourselves and figuring out how do we actually get tangible gains aside from this whole Democratic plantation that has been sold to us for so long. So anyone else have anything to add before we go to the next topic? All right, looks like everyone's gotten out of it. Let me check the actually check the audience to see if we have anything. I don't see any questions for us. So guys, if you have any questions, just at me and ask a question, and we'll try to get it to the question before the end of the live stream. So the next topic we're going to touch on is African presidents. And so, Dwayne, do you want to introduce this topic?
Yeah, I saw recently the president of Gabon, Ali Bongo, he was hospitalized in Saudi Arabia, and that whole story raised the issue again of African presidents that have to leave Africa to get healthcare. And the issue is always, why don't these presidents just improve the healthcare system in their own country rather than always having to go overseas to get treatment? Because the message is sent to poor citizens who don't have the resources or the wealth to fly all the way to a different continent to get healthcare, is that you're stuck with the system that you have. And in a lot of cases, especially if you live in a rural village where you have no access to healthcare, a lot of times Africans are dying from preventable diseases. And what happened recently this week as well is President David Granger of Guyana, which is a South American country, he went to Cuba to get medical attention. So I'm looking at this, and again, it shows the kind of leadership that we have globally as African people, where a lot of our people live in countries where presidents, rather than investing in the healthcare system and improving that for the citizens, would prefer to fly to different countries that have better healthcare systems to get treatment, and they're leaving their citizens, these poor in a poor healthcare system where a lot of times people are dying from preventable illnesses. So I think what these stories demonstrate to me is just, like I said, another example of the kind of leadership that we have globally. We have leaders, and this again goes back to what we're talking about in terms of voting and type of leaders we elect even here in the United States. Is as African people globally, we have a leadership that's very content with selling us out and putting their own interests above the interests of the masses of African people. And that's what I want to say about that story.
Why do y'all think this is you know, I always read like my comments, and some people will say, you know, Africans, why do you tolerate these leaders? You have to get them out and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I absolutely agree with the sentiment. But the issue is that, you know, who's to say if one of us Africans in America, if we were in Africa, will we be doing what these people say? Are we going to, you know, just, hey, let's get the president out? Like a lot of times we're kind of in the system and we try to figure out our way through it. But a lot of times it's also about trying to survive. And the thing that the bigger picture I'm always looking at is, it's funny that these issues are predominantly, and well, I don't know one country that is a black country, meaning a country where the majority of the population is black, that does not have this problem with African leaders who are selling the people out. Every single country is having the same issue. So why is it that Africans, why is this something that we deal with? And you know, there's corrupt leaders everywhere, but there's a monopoly of them inside of countries that are representing us. So do one of you want to touch on that?
Yeah, when you say monopoly, that reminded me of Kwame Ture. He said that, you know, African people, we have the most corrupt petty bourgeoisie of all people. And I think one of the reasons for that is that as a people globally, we're still dominated. We have no power. When you look at all these African dictators that oppress their people, the reason why they have power to do so is because they have guns and resources that are given to them by Western government. So we have no power. And Malcolm X spoke about this in terms of the house Negro and the field Negro. Now, the slave in the house, the only power that he had was power that was given to him by the slave master. And that's the situation we're in as a people. Most of our politicians are only in positions of power and influence because it's been handed to them by Europeans. And that, again, going back to what we're talking about in terms of voting here in the United States, a lot of our politicians, we elect them and their hands are tied because they have no power. They have, you know, lobbyists, people, special interest groups, people that invest the money in their campaign. We were talking about Obama. You know, a lot of what Obama did was serving the interests of Wall Street because those are the people that financed his campaign. So this is why I think, you know, Black Power, and to mention Kwame Ture again, that was, you know, it's the phrase that he popularized, Black Power. That's why power is so critical, because without power, all we'll have is these puppet leaders that we don't control. You know, these are puppet leaders that are controlled by other people. So I think that's why this is such a global issue, because global people really don't have the power necessary to select their own leaders. And without the power, voting becomes irrelevant because you can vote for whoever you want. But if the person you're electing has no power to affect any sort of change, then, you know, it's a waste of time. You're better off trying to establish that power first, and then putting your own leaders in place second.
So it sounds like from what you're saying, for like, let's say I'm an individual African country, this is not something that we can deal with within the country. We have to deal with it internationally. And you know, I mean, like you said with Obama, that was a good point. You know, he had Wall Street who he had to benefit, and we have a lot of these African countries. They have France that's backing them. They have England that's sending them stuff. They have the United States. They have China. So Frank or Pierre, like, what do we do as far as trying to tackle these things internationally?
Yeah, I can comment. I think Dwan just gave a very good analysis of, you know, what we need to do. I mean, we can just look at history. With what, you know, those that came before us, they are playing the guideline that they gave. They gave a very profound guideline for us to follow. For example, like Kwame Ture. Kwame Ture said the only way forward is by organization, is by we coming together to organize. And for example, I can give example of one of the men who always call himself Pan-Africanist, Dr. Omar. And, you know, I mean, he got a great idea, but the reason why things are not being done as he speaks, because he's doing it by himself. He's doing it alone. He's not organizing. He's not putting people together to pass on the knowledge. So he's just saying it. So, I mean, with the imperialists, they see him as no threat, because one tree, like the African proverb say, one tree cannot make a forest. So the imperialists it's not shocking the imperialists, because they see no action, they see nothing. So it's just like you know, one bird just sitting in the forest making a lot of noise. That's what Dr. Oman is doing. Is he a Pan-African? Is he because he has some great idea? He got some solution, but he's not mobilizing. That's the problem. We have to mobilize. And for example, and that can also go on the continent. And the reason why, I will say this: there's no African president that is totally independent, that is totally in power of position. For example, we have Robert Mugabe. When Robert Mugabe was in power, and when he did all those things, to start speaking about in favor of black people and to empower black people and for black people to be totally liberated and to own what belongs to them, the first thing that happened, what happened? They put sanction on him. And once they put sanction on him, although he came to UN and said things like the same way Dr. Omar doing it, but it did not move the imperialists, even though he's a president in Africa, but it did not move them because it wasn't something that he was doing to mobilize the rest of the African leaders to follow. So when he come to UN and speak, even though he was speaking in favor of African will say, yes, this is the only man that we have on the continent. It wasn't moving the imperialists because he was just one man making noise, and the rest of the other president, there was puppet. You see it? But when it came to a point where other African leaders and other Africans head of states and African parliament and start following his position, like for example, by Julian Malema then fighting for land reform or land reparation, the idea came from Robert Mugabe. You see it? So when people saw that happening, and then that's a time, even though the people themselves, the rise or and the army rise or, but there was some hand behind the hand, that was pushing the military. There was hand behind that was funding the military, that was funding the people to rise against Mugabe, because now people were following his idea, of what needs to be done in Africa. So like the one say, the only thing that we can do is through mobilization. And it was through mobilization globally and locally that African leaders start getting the power, the idea of independent, of self-government, of self-independent. And we were African in the diaspora, African on the continent, were working together and passing on information and knowledge on how things to be done. So it was globally. So we just have to go by again and look at what our forefathers did and try to get and their understanding and apply the same formula.
Pierre, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, basically what you all have been saying. When a leader is a puppet, he's going to be a puppet. When they move the strings, he's going to move. Even if he doesn't want to, he has to move or he doesn't stay in power. So if things were to change, if the imperialists wasn't in power around the world, then you would be able to actually do something. It's like when Haiti gained independence. What happened? Why did they fail? Because the imperial powers got together and they said, we're going to freeze Haiti out. We're going to freeze them out. We're not going to trade with them. We're not going to, and I'm talking about when they originally gained independence, we're not going to trade with them, and then eventually they just couldn't survive. So if the African countries put their differences aside and did the same thing, then they would be all right. Then they would actually that come in there and can survive because they don't, they can actually think based on what their people want and need instead of what the, whoever is,
Yeah, and I think Frank says that really key too. Like, we have to understand, like, so, if anyone watches my channel, you probably are Pan-Africanist. You probably are someone who actually wants to do something about the conditions that are going on. And you might be active doing those things in your own individual sphere. But if we're not organized, meaning this is really why we created the Federation of African Liberation. Like, I've not really been a fan of organizations, going through different transformations. But I realized that if you're not organized, then you're not set to do anything. You'll just be an individual on social media complaining. You'll just be an individual who might have an organization, but if that organization is not connected to the overall movement, then that organization has a very small sphere of influence. So if we understand as African people that it's not just, you know, if I'm in Gabon, it's not just my president, it's also all these African presidents. And so the key to me, I agree, is really to organize internationally and organize in such a way that we're not looking at these as individual instances, but we're really looking at this as an overall scheme to exploit African people. And if we're not drawing the lines and connecting the dots, then we're just going to be played, because what the imperialists do want, they want you to keep fighting as an individual. They want you to keep chasing after shadows. They want you to keep going after saying the same issue is the issue. Oh, it's my president, that's what the issue is. Oh, it's corruption, that's what the issue is, because they really don't want you to see that the real issue is that they have an interest in the demise of your people. They have an interest in things going on in your country. They have an interest in your natural resources. And if we don't draw those connections to why these things are happening, why African leaders are so corrupt, even in the Black community, why in the American Black community, why is it that our so-called leaders are being funded by people that don't look like us? Why is it that this is so prevalent in our community also? And if you don't connect the dots and realize that that's because there's an overall machine that's going on behind the scenes, then you won't be posed to do any change. And similarly, we have to organize in such a way to meet power with power. Because if we're trying to handle things, Africans in America handle things over here, Africans in Haiti handle things over there. And you know, Haiti's having a really crazy uprising right now. But if you're just seeing it as your government, you know, that's what they're saying. Our government's corrupt, our government's corrupt. But you know, there's something that's going on when it's not just your government. Every government with a Black face that's supposed to represent Black people, it's the same thing going on. So when you start connecting the dots, that's when you actually be supposed to do something. And when you actually connect with Africans throughout the diaspora and on the continent, then you'll actually see that there is a bigger enemy that we have, and the enemy isn't necessarily the thing that we see in front of us. So anything else to add before we go to the next topic?
Yeah, I want to touch on something because Frank mentioned Mugabe, and I think Mugabe is a perfect example of what I was talking about in terms of how international forces, you know, dictate what happens on the African continent. Because the thing the Western media tends to forget about Mugabe is that for most of the time Mugabe was in power in Zimbabwe, he was supported by the West. He was even knighted by the Queen at one point. But what happened with Mugabe, and the reason why he fell out with Western governments, is because he started taking the land back from the white people in Zimbabwe. So the message that Western governments really want to send is, we're okay with you being a dictator, we're okay with you oppressing your own people, but the moment you start taking land back from white people and doing anything that we deem as being oppressive to white people, then we'll step in and we'll take action. In South Africa, it's the same thing. There's all kinds of corruption and issues in South Africa that Fox News and the rest of the American media never cared about. But the moment you start seeing people in South Africa talking about, we're going to take our land back from white people, suddenly, but we need to cut aid from South Africa, we need to put sanctions on South Africa. So, you know, those are perfect examples of how Western countries are fine with African dictators, corruption on the part of African governments. They'll support that, but the moment you see African governments moving in a direction that's against their interests and in an independent direction that they feel they can't control, that's when they want to step in and then put in place sanctions and force regime change. I just want to make that point because, you know, we talk about Mugabe very often. I think that's the point that gets, you know, neglected, is that European governments are okay with Mugabe as long as he's serving their interests.
That's a great point, because that's very true. Like, he was, you know, the second, it's so funny, like, out of everyone that's demonized on the African continent, it's the ones that actually do something that's against Western interests. And I always wonder, like, why do y'all feel like Mugabe is this horrible person? And it's like a lot of dictators, you know, they act like Fidel Castro was this horrible, Cuba was this horrible place. And when you actually look at Cubans in the country, you know, they're telling you, no, it's great. You know, we have free healthcare. All of our children are literate, you know, things like that. But the fact is that Fidel Castro was going directly against Western imperialism. And that's when things are demonized. Venezuela is another example, because Venezuela is a socialist country and they're very much anti-American imperialism. And you have all these other countries that have this horrible corruption, all these other countries that are broke. And Venezuela is the one that gets pointed out by everyone. You know, it's so funny when people, whenever I say, oh, I'm a socialist, I believe that the means of production should be owned by the people. They'll say, well, looking at Venezuela, look at the example. And they don't want to look at like all the situations that put Venezuela in that position as far as imperialism and, you know, Western things happening behind the scenes with, you know, U.S. intelligence and whatnot. But they'll point out that country, but no one looks at all the capitalist countries that are also suffering. A lot of capitalist countries are just as corrupt, just as bankrupt, and we don't look at those countries and say, oh, you're representative of capitalism, yet they want to do that with socialism. So really, it's just about the interest of the West, the interest of imperialism, and whenever African leaders actually do stuff for the people, when they're actually not for the money grabs, that's whenever you're going to see people try to plot to get them out of power. And you know, one more thing I'll add on this subject is that we do have to remember that before these African presidents, in a lot of these countries, there were presidents and leaders that were not corrupt, that were not trying to just put money in their pocket, not trying to just serve the West. And guess what? All of them got disposed of. And so, you know, we should understand it's not that we can't produce authentic individuals. It's not that we can't produce people who can actually represent us, because we have produced Patrice Lumumba, we have produced Thomas Sankara, we produced all these people. But the fact is that the Western governments are going to continue to put their people in power. And so our focus has to be creating a government where they can't interfere with our interests, where they can't tell us who should be our leaders, or, you know, just put all their support behind one leader. And that's always going to be difficult, because it takes a lot of organization on our part, and it takes us actually seeing the root to our problem is not the fact that these are individuals, but it's the fact that these individuals have the ability to make decisions that affect all of us, have the ability to ration away our resources, to take on debt for us and have our children pay it back. So I went on a whole tangent, but anything else to add? Okay, so I guess we'll go to the next subject. Actually, wait, before we go, I want to go back to the last topic on voting. I've seen 2 comments in the chat room that I did like. So Zivo Batutua, I'm sorry if I butchered your name, he said, we need our own political party. What do you guys think about that? You know, the idea of a Black political party. It's been said, I think it's been said a lot. Is that our solution to this botched political spirit that we have? Do we need like an all-Black political party? What would that party look like? Would that party have influence on the actual political sphere, or like how would that play out?
Yeah, I'll answer that. I think in terms of a Black political party, and this is a conversation I've had very often. Now, obviously, for demographic reasons, a Black political party probably won't be too successful in terms of national elections. But I think it'd be a great idea in terms of, you know, taking back control of your communities, because for Black communities, there's really no reason why we can't at least control the politics in our communities. And, you know, Malcolm X also spoke about Black nationalism being Black, you know, control of the community. So we should be able to control the businesses in our communities. Black community control of the police is an issue I've been seeing being raised more and more. And again, that goes back to, if you have your own political party, you can control the police in your community. So I think it's a great idea, but we also have to understand, as African people, the country isn't designed with us in mind. So there are going to be certain limitations to certain steps we take. So, for example, trying to organize a Black political party, you're probably not going to be very successful in terms of, you know, being a national party trying to compete with the Democratic and Republican Party. And the other thing we have to keep in mind too is the system is designed to be a 2-party system. You know, you have the Green Party and the Libertarian Party, which have no political space in terms of, you know, the national scheme of things, because the system is designed in a particular way. So trying to organize a Black political party within the system as it is it'll help us in certain ways, but as I said, there's going to be certain limitations to that as well.
Yeah, how I envision like it could work the best is, like you said, like if we have a Black political party, we have to understand we're not going to it's more than likely not the case that we're going to get someone to be president from our party. So we're not talking about national politics. And you know what it could be used for though is to have stances, like public stances, like, oh, we won't support. So you know, I don't know. We're going to use who's a politician right now. We're not going to support Senator Mendez, who's running in New Jersey right now. We're not going to support him because, you know, this, that, and the third. Like, that could be a way that we could affect national politics, is actually give African people guidance. Like, this is why we don't think you should vote for this person, or here's reason why you might want to vote for this person. But it wouldn't be to put our own candidates inside of the national political realm, because as we should know, the national political realm, that's, you know, we are a small minority. No, we're not that small. We're like 13%, which isn't that insignificant. But as we're talking about national politics, it wouldn't be like the same type of thing. However, if we want to use local elections, like Dwayne was saying, like, we should absolutely have control over our local political candidates, over our local political sphere. And that's actually, I think, the best way for us to think about it. The other thing I would think about is that if we connect our local, first of all, connect our Black political parties, you know, across the U.S. So we might have a branch here, but we're all connected in the U.S. and also connect ourselves to Africa, because we should know that what's going on in Africa is very determinative of what happens here. So we might not, you know, be over there, but we can certainly have political agendas. We could have referendums. We could have memos talking about things that are going on. We could use that as a means to organize around the continent of Africa. And we could all, you know, use that to connect each other. So that's the way I would envision a Black political party working. So anyone else have anything before we go to the next subject? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I just agree. I mean, I said it wouldn't make, like you said, it wouldn't make a big difference as far as in national elections, but I absolutely think we should have a political party, and it would make a difference in, you know, your community, like elections and for you know, like elections for the mayor and whatnot, and as you said, it could spread around, and then if it did become a thing that, you know, went all around the country, and then it could go outside of the country, you know, into Africa, that political party could, you know, could become something. I mean, it was a reason why the Black Panther Party was hated so much. You know, one, can you hear me? Okay. One, because they said basically, hey, you're not going to slaughter us. If you do, we're going to shoot back. And two, because they were literally a political party. Like that was their purpose, to say we're going to, you know, vote Black. We're going to buy Black. We're going to do everything Black, and we're going to do it, whatever we got. We're going to put it all into politics, you know, and that's how you do make change. So I do think that that's something that we need to do. But also, like Dwayne said, the way it's set up, it's they make it almost impossible for you to do anything like that. So until we mobilize, like, you know, we're not going to be able to do it. But if we were to, you know, mobilize and keep organizing, then I think that would be a step in the right direction.
Okay, so the next subject we're going to talk about is Minister Farrakhan. I've actually wanted to talk about this for a minute, but didn't want to do a whole video on it, but I do think it's very important to use him as an example. So if y'all haven't been paying attention, basically what happened is, so Minister Farrakhan was giving a sermon to at his temple, and he said the words, you know, about, he's always accused of being anti-Semitic. I personally haven't heard anything out of his mouth that I would say is anti-Semitic. Like, to me, and we're talking about anti-Semitic, meaning someone who is racist or, well, Judaism is a religion, so has, you know, some type of strong prejudice against Jews. I've never heard anything that I would say is that. Now, I'm not saying that in the Black Liberation Movement, period. I haven't heard things that are that. I have definitely heard things in the Black Liberation Movement. But having been someone for myself, I always go back and I listen to things in the full context. For example, Minister Farrakhan back in the 80s, I think, or maybe the 90s, it was written in newspapers that he said that Hitler was a great man. So if you were to read that, it's like, oh my gosh, he's so horrible, he's anti-Semitic. When you actually watch the whole speech, what he says is he was a great man. Then he says, it doesn't mean he was a good man. He said he wasn't a good man for Black people because people forget Africans were also killed in the Holocaust. But he says he's a great man, talking about the fact that this is a historical fact, y'all can like it or not, but Hitler did do something very impressive. Like if you look at the history of World War II, at that time, whenever he started the Nazis and everything, Germany really was in a super depressive state. It was very poor. The country was just got their butt whipped in World War I. And somehow he managed to make Nazi Germany like this great power again. So he was saying that was great, but he wasn't a good man. Now, someone took he was a great man and took that one sentence and made that the headline. So this is something that, you know, a lesson for us in the African community is that whenever you hear things said like that, always go back and listen to the whole clip, because when I first read that, you know, I was like, oh, wow, he said that. And then I watched the whole speech. And it was the same instance with this, because the headline that I saw was Minister Farrakhan says, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm anti-termite. And when I just read that, I'm like, oh, did he say that? You know, that was kind of off. Like, why would he say that? So when I actually went back and watched the whole broadcast, there's no way that, you know, if anyone who watched the whole broadcast would actually think that he was saying that Jews are termites. He's saying, he's not comparing them. He's saying, I'm not anti-Semitic. The only thing I care about is anti-termite. So that was, you know, a good example to me of how they will, well, first of all, I want to start here. I know we lost the Wayne for a second, so we'll just go with the three of us. But why Minister Farrakhan? Why is it that with him, out of all the people in the Black community, that the media continues to go after him and to try to discredit him and his influence?
Well, the reason why is because, and you know, I've watched Farrakhan, you know, as much as I can, you know, and I agree with most of what he says. And the reason why the media is run by the Jews, mostly, they're trying to discredit Farrakhan because he's exposing the lies that they don't want people to know. So they're trying to discredit him. You know, this is how they do. They discredit you, even if you will believe you, because you've already been labeled as and the same reason what else they meet that when me and you call out a white person for racism and say that their privilege now is based off of that, they'll say what? It's reverse racism. Like this is reverse racism. Like, no, it's just the truth. It's just the truth that you don't want to hear. Same thing with Farrakhan. He will, if you watch his videos or his speeches, he will break down the entire history of the so-called white Jews, and he will show, you know, where they couldn't possibly be the and he will connect the dots, and then he will show the Jew how the Jews were responsible for the slave trade, the role they played in the slave trade. He would break it down and show this Jewish guy can break down his you know, his family line, and he owned slaves, and they brought so if you watch it and you look at it and you know, pay attention to it, you'll just see basically he's just exposing lies that they're trying to hide, you know. And so I think they just, you know, they want to discredit him right away and say, you know, you're anti-Semitic. But I think when he said I'm not anti-Semite, I'm anti-termite. I think he was also referring to the fact that him and a lot of people believe that they're not Semitic people. The people that's calling him out as a anti-Semitic, I don't think a lot of people, and it's a lot of proof that can point to the fact that these current white Jews aren't Semitic people. So I think that's what he was kind of pointing to, saying I'm not anti-Semite, I'm termite is basically saying, well, they're not even, you can't even call me anti-Semitic if you're not the real Jews in the first place. But I mean, to answer the question, it's because I think Farrakhan's telling a lot of truth, a lot of things that will expose a lot of people that might, lose people a lot of money and might take away some of their power. So this is how they try to discredit him before, so they basically, like, for instance, what he put on Facebook, Facebook took it off. Like, since when does Facebook take something off? Like he didn't like call the Jews some type of derogatory name or anything like that. He just said exactly what you said, and it disappeared from Facebook. So I'm saying this is the type of power that they have, and they're just trying not to lose any of that.
I think the other thing with Farrakhan is anyone who looks at his history. So when you look at the Million Man March, there's kind of like a fight to kind of paint the narrative of Black America. Who do we listen to? So, for example, there's a lot of people who are paid by outside entities, but these people are put in front of us and we're told these are your leaders. And so, and that's a lot of people. I always think it's weird when you have people who got to be Black leaders not by going through the Black community, but they had to go through the white community. And a lot of these same people you'll never see like in the hardcore Black community. Like, I never see Michael Eric Dyson, organizing in the Black community. Like, these are people who are put in front of us like they're our leaders, and yet they went through white institutions, and then white institutions bought into them and then validated them. Now, if you look at the comparison between support for these leaders, and I'm not trying to paint the picture that all Black people support Farrakhan, and Pierre said he doesn't agree with everything he says. I'm the same. Like, I'm not in Nation of Islam, but like I definitely support a lot of what he says. I support a lot of what he does, what he actually does in the community, the fact that he's actually in the community. But when you compare like the support like that Farrakhan has inside of a lot of poor, disenfranchised Black communities to those people who are put in front of us by the white establishment as being our leaders, is very different. And it kind of creates a problem for them. Like, oh, we can't keep this image up because, they had a Million Man March. They had over 1 million Black men go down to DC. So how do we say that we're the ones who, this guy that we put in front of them, that's the guy who represents the Black community. You have this other guy who we don't like how he talks, but yet he had 1 million men show up to Washington, D.C. It kind of gives them difficulty painting the narrative that, people don't really mess with Farrakhan. And it was the same thing that they tried to do with Malcolm. It's the same thing they try to do with a lot of our controversial leaders that actually speak to the issues, is they try to find a way to reconcile the fact that this person has so much support. And a lot of times they'll try to do it by having some Black person that's like in media. Oh, what do you think about this? Oh, he doesn't represent the Black community. He doesn't represent me. And he doesn't represent the Black community, but he does have a lot more influence in the Black community than a lot of these other people that the Democrats or liberals and period try to act like have such a stronghold on us. So that's like my theory, is that Farrakhan gives difficulty to the narrative that, all Black people, we like Obama, we all like Hillary Clinton, we all think this way, we all think the Democrats are our saviors. He creates a conflict for that because he's independent of all that stuff. He's very controversial, and he'll say it how he sees it. And they don't want us to connect to him as a leader because obviously a lot of what he says is directly it's directly contrary to the interests of the United States. So Dwayne or Frank, do you have anything to add?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I got something to add. Again, it go to the point. Can you hear me right? Okay. It goes to the point where it says, the parable that says knowledge is power. And as I read from Frederick Douglass, The Life and Death of Frederick Douglass by Frederick Douglass himself, few pages, about a couple of hundred pages. It says, the aim of my master is to keep me ignorant so that I can know what he's doing to me is against humanity. I think the reason why the media is against Louis Farrakhan, number one, although we got black faces out there on the media, but they are doing a job because the media is owned by people who don't have interest in our struggle. The media is owned by people who don't have interest in what we go through, what we face. So people that are out there that look like you and myself are not really there to talk about what we go through, to talk about our struggle, because they are going to be fired and they are going to lose their job. So they are there to say whatsoever that will go in the interest of the person or the race that own that media. Okay. And I'll go straight to the reason why Mr. Louis Farrakhan, he's being hit left and right is that there is no question that you post to this individual without answering it perfectly, no matter how it is. If you go to the Bible, he know the Bible. He will quote the Bible and he will give it to you and he will give you the answer. If you go to the Quran, he know the Quran. He will quote the Quran and he will give it to you. So he know both sides, left and right. And again, he's not the type of person, that just look at black, black people, black struggle. He go both way. He's both way. So, for example, there are some things Trump will say, and he will say that, look, Trump is saying that I agree with Trump because it open black people are. You see it? And then he will say, he will talk about, the Democrat, that the Democrat are there, to lie to black people. They are there to make black people sleep. And it's like he make black people to realize, the differences, like what Democrat do and what Republican do, or what Donald Trump do. And he would say, look, Donald Trump is there. The reason why Donald Trump can in power is because, it open our eyes. Is because it make people, to bring out what they have been thinking about you. Is for you to wake up, for you to be honest, for you to understand what people think about you, what they've been hiding inside of them towards you. It just, and so, I really like this guy because, and one of the reasons why, again, they hate him is because he have a congregation. He have a mass congregation and he's giving them this knowledge. He's passing this knowledge onto them. And sometimes when I look at his congregation, they dress like the way they want to dress. And you see, they don't care. They dress the way they want to dress. And he tell people the way things should be, and people follow him. That's one thing they really hate him, because he have a mass follower and they don't want that to happen. And he have never failed in any question. He answered the question based on how things are being done in society. And that's one reason they hate him, because he has never failed in any question. If you go to this guy to a question thinking that you're going to catch him or you're going to defeat him, it's lies. Sometimes you that are going to pose this question, you're going to defeat yourself. And to the extent that you even afraid to even ask this man question. This is another reason they really don't like him, because people are afraid to come out to ask this individual question, because they are just going to make them look little. Yeah, that's my point.
I see an interesting comment in the chat. This is by Ronald. He said, Farrakhan being connected to a religion automatically insulates him and isolates him from being a true Black leader. True Black leaders can, I think he meant to say, cannot be connected to a colonial religion. That you're disqualifying a lot of true Black leaders. To me, the truest Black leader of all time is Minister Malcolm X, and he was connected to a religion. It's not, first of all, Islam is not a colonial religion, neither is Christianity. There's no religion that originated in Europe. All these religions originated outside of Europe or were adopted by Europe, turned into, Frank, mute your mic. Thanks. All these religions were whitewashed and then taught to Africans. That's one thing to realize. But the other thing is that you're really disqualifying a whole community of people who actually did things for the Black community. And we have to understand Marcus Garvey, he was a Christian. Malcolm X was a Muslim. Like, these are people who did more than almost any people who you want to name. The thing that I think we have to really get to when it comes to us who are talking about Black liberation, you know, we have to be comfortable that other people are going to have their own beliefs. But when we're coming together to talk about Black issues, that's what we're talking about. So if you're a religious person, if you're a religious leader, and you can make that separation, then that's where we can get together, because I don't need to come, you know, to Farrakhan and debate him about Islam, and I'm a Christian. I don't have to debate him about Christianity. But if we want to talk about Black issues, me and him agree on a lot. So I can talk about him all day. Like I said, my favorite leader is Malcolm X. If I had a problem with Muslims, like, I would not, you know, be able to listen to one of the greatest thinkers of all time to me. So we have to get out of this. You know, I think colonialism and slavery has taught us to be bigots, honestly, even against our own people, and taught us that we can't be tolerant. And the fact is, you know, that mentality of you all must think like me, that's not African. African people are not innately like that. African people are innately the most tolerant people around the world. So we have to understand, we are, as a people, we've always embraced people. And there is times where that definitely has led us astray, but ultimately that's just who we are. We embrace people. This idea that you don't think like me, therefore I can't mess with you, that's something that was taught to you. That's a mentality that is not innate in you as an African person. So to me, I'm saying all this to say, I don't care, you know, what religion you worship. I don't care if you do a traditional African spirituality. I don't care if you are a Muslim, Catholic, whatever you are. If you're here to talk about building the Black community, doing right for the Black community, what is Black liberation, how are we going to move the Black community forward, then that's all I care about whenever we're in that space. I'm not, you know, obviously, I'm not going to go to your mosque for that, but I'm going to go talk to you, whatever platform that you have designated for that, and whatever platform you have designated for your religion, that's for your religion. So understand, that's why Malcolm, you know, that's why to me, like, he became such a threat, because when he started saying, oh, all this separation that we have created between the Muslims and the Christians, that's honestly is messing us up, because guess what? I'm not getting my butt whooped because I'm a Muslim. You're not getting your butt whooped because you're a Christian. We're getting our butt whooped because we're Black. So how stupid is it that we're going to argue about our religion, where we're actually, our problem has nothing to do with our religion. Our problem has everything to do with what we are. We're Black. So, you know, I just had to get that out. Anyone have any other comments?
Yeah, well, when you first started reading it, I was shaking my head in agreement, because what I thought she was saying was basically Farrakhan's hasn't been can't be a leader of all Black people, because his movement is strictly a religious movement. If you like, to me, I feel, which I agree with Farrakhan, I respect him a lot. His movement is simply the Nation of Islam's movement, meaning if I don't get the call in that he preaches Nation of Islam, like, I'm a part of his movement. And so that's what I thought she was saying. Now, and then at the end, that's when she said that, at least she said, like, no leader can have can be a part of the colonial religion. And first of all, you know, these religions are African in origin. They were just stolen and changed, and like, it's pretty much every single one of our leaders had some type of religion affiliation for the most part. So, but what I will agree with her is, I think a lot more Black people would follow Farrakhan if it was more of just a Black movement instead of you know, like you mentioned Malcolm X, and although he was very religious, like you said, when he realized that this isn't going to work, he realized that if we are going to get liberation, it can't be based through religion. Like, it can be, and that's why when he came with organization, was whatever religion you are, that's fine, as long as you want to, you know, free Black people, that's fine. I don't think Farrakhan kind of gives that. I think he when he preaches is more of, he preaches like Farrakhan. He's telling the truth, and he's exposing the lies. He's calling them out. But then at the end, it's also like he's recruiting to his, you know, religion. As I think Malcolm eventually was like, I don't want you to come to my religion necessarily. If you want to, sure, but I want you to join this movement. You know, and I once say he said I'm more religious and Malcolm was more political, and he was like, you need both. And basically that kind of sums it up. You know, like Malcolm was religious also, but he was way more political. And that's why way more people followed him, you know, because it was more about the politics than the religion. As to with Farrakhan, as he said himself, it's more about the religion than it is the politics. So that's all I have to say on that.
I'm a smile. Go ahead, Frank. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me just come in quick and give a very quick, like what African Esquire said. You know, she gave a very good analysis, and also Pierre, you gave a very good analysis. But let me just come in quick to add to the question the individual asks. You know, sometimes we also have to be very careful on what we read. In terms of when it comes to black people, because there are a lot of history, there are a lot of story out there that are written for black people, which are not written by black people. It is also written by the oppressor. So when we read it, we should also be able to put it into content, to be able to put into contents that we benefit as well. It's just as saying, it's the same as saying that the problem to Africa is because we have different languages, we have different dialect, or we have the diversity in all of those things. Like when you say such a thing, you are saying, you are agreeing to the imperialist boast that they have out there about black people, that the problem of Africa is because they are so diverse, it's because they had so many languages. But equally so, when you listen to the tone of the imperialists, or when you listen to the tone of America or Europe, what they always says is, what makes America great is diversity. So you have to put that in context too. So the same man that I read that wrote a book about me that says, the problem of Africa is diversity. It's because it has so many languages. It's because it has so many dialects. It's the same person that's saying in their society, diversity is what makes them great. You see, so you also have to put that in perspective that something wrong somewhere here. And I'm not understanding your language, because you just told me the problem of my society is because of diversity, and now you're saying diversity is what made you great. You see, so we have to be very careful on what we go out there by saying, the problem of Africa is because we have, religion, we have this, we have that. Okay, before the European went to Africa, there was so many religions in Africa. There was not one religion. There were so many religions. There were so many practices. And even as that, historians tell us Christianity was already in Africa. Even if you really know your history, it was in Ethiopia. You see it? It was practiced in Ethiopia. But obviously, maybe it was just different from how the European came and portrayed it to us. You see, so Christianity was part of African religion, because in Africa there was so many ethnicity, there were so many ethnic groups, and each ethnic group have their different way of life, have their different way of communication, have their different way of dancing, all those things. So there was so many religion in Africa, but yet and still we were united. We were one when it came to the interest of the entire race. A lot of times there was no nation. So when it came to the race, we were united. We did things together, even though we have so many religions, we have so many dialects, we did things differently. But when it came to our interests, we were one. And example, and it goes as the European to it goes as the white man. The white man can be poor as to live in a black man neighborhood. But when it comes to their race, they don't say, oh, that man got money, or I'm poor, and I'm going to go with the black people. I'm not saying black people are poor, but I'm just giving a scenario on how the system has stereotyped us. The white man don't say, oh, I'm going towards the black people because the black people are poor. Once they come to their race, no matter how poor they are, they will support their race. They will support their interests, because it's about their race. It's about the next generation to come as their race to benefit from it. So this is where we need to try to understand and start thinking, say, oh, this person is a Christian, this person is a Muslim, this person is a Muslim, this person is a traditionally. We have to get away with those things. When it comes to when it comes to the interests of Black people, that's what we should be focusing on. That's
yeah.
it.
That's a great oration. So yeah, and I'll just say one thing though. Like I think that after Malcolm, that the nation under Farrakhan, when he took the leadership, tried to kind of go the same way as him, because at one point it really was more so like the nation kind of staying to themselves, and then at another point, you notice, like, Farrakhan hangs out with all the rappers and he'll hang out with all these people. However, I do think that's a valid criticism of the Nation of Islam, because I'll say for my father, for example, me and him and my nephew, we went to the anniversary of the Million Man March that was in DC a couple of years ago. And he was very motivated after the Million Man March to actually get involved with the community. Now, my father's not religious at all, really. But he was just motivated to try to connect. So he started, they had I think it was called Justice or Else, I think. And they had groups all throughout the US. And so when he went back to our hometown, he basically tried to connect with the group Justice or Else that was in our hometown. And what he ended up finding was that they were cool with him for a while, but then it was well, are you going to join the nation? That was basically the question. He's like, no, I'm not going to join the nation. I don't really believe in that. And so he was so disappointed because he didn't want to join the nation. He really didn't. He wasn't able to continue on with that group. So that to me is a valid criticism of why the Nation of Islam has not. To me, they could have done so much more. They could have been so much more effective. And had they fully embraced Malcolm's strategy, which was, Malcolm, he was, I think he was just as religious, but he wasn't going to put that out to the public. So he, before he died, he started 2 new mosques. He started one that was actually just for Muslims, and he started he started a mosque for Muslims, and then he started an organization, the Organization of Afro-American Unity. So he started both of those at the same time because he wanted to have his religious space where he was going to discuss his religion with other Muslims, but he also wanted the space for politics. And I think that's the issue with the nation, is that they only have, as far as actually organizing, they only have the nation. They don't have the organizing outside of the nation. So anything else to add, Dwayne, before we go to the next subject?
Yeah, I was actually listening to the discussion about the Nation of Islam, and what I was thinking is locally, I actually work with the Nation of Islam here, and I mean, there's some of the most dedicated brothers and sisters to the African struggle. There's a lot of because I go to their events regularly, and I'm not Muslim, I'm not part of the organization, but it's open to everyone in the community. Anyone can go and join the Nation of Islam events. They always, brothers and sisters from Nation of Islam always coming to my events. So I think in terms of trying to look at the Black, the African struggle in terms of religion, I would have to say that some of the most religious people in the community, in my experience, are some of the most dedicated people to the struggle. What I find is the people that are very critical of the Nation of Islam, critical of Black Christians and Muslims, the only place you find those people is on the internet criticizing. Now, when I'm doing events in the community, I'll never see those people coming out to the events. Those people want to assist me with organizing, but the brothers and sisters in the Nation of Islam will come out and give that support. So just my opinion on that is I don't really look at people's religious beliefs, because I'm with Malcolm. Leave your religion at home. When you're coming out in the community, we organize as African people, and I've met a lot of Black Christians, Black Muslims that understand it. Just yesterday, I was speaking to a friend of mine who's a very devout Christian, and we were talking about African spirituality because she studies African, West African spirituality. She's very much into that tradition. So I've even met Muslims and Christians who understand African religions better than I do, because their approaches in studying African religions, it'll help them to better understand Christianity or Islam. So I don't just what religion they practice. I look at more of their dedication to the struggle and their actions, and that's my view with the Nation of Islam. Now, like I said, I'm not a member of the Nation. Malcolm X obviously was very critical of the Nation of Islam when he left, and I agree with most of his criticism. So it's not even an organization that I ever considered joining. But I will say that the Nation of Islam is one of the most dedicated organizations we have out there. Even with all the faults.
And I think that's what is key. You know, a lot of us sit on the sidelines and we have criticisms, but we're not organizing. And I'll also add that, you know, I was in Baltimore because I went to law school in Baltimore during the Freddie Gray riots. And I vividly remember, like, you know, as I said, I'm a Christian, but I was definitely not, I didn't like the approach of the preachers to the Freddie Gray riots, because they basically went out in the streets during the riots and they were just praying, which I'm not against praying, but what the Nation of Islam did at this time, they were the ones that went out and actually stopped looters from looting Black businesses. So, you know, and this is out, you know, this is dangerous out, but a lot of brothers from the Nation of Islam actually were there standing in front of Black businesses like, you're not getting in here. So, you know, let's give credit where it's due. You know, no group is perfect. No organization is perfect. You know, we're all human beings. So anything that we create is always going to have problems. That's why there's never a Black organization that does not have problems. There's never going to be a country without corruption. There's always going to be some issues, but let's give credit where it's due. And, you know, just try to connect where we agree. You know, I'm not in the Nation of Islam, but I can connect with a lot that they do because I agree with certain things that they do. So I think that's the key. So our last topic is Ghana. So if any of you haven't heard, Ghana supposedly is becoming Francophone. Now I'm going to read, this is an article on some Language magazine. I had to find some random article because not a lot of people are talking about this. So Ghana commits to French. Ghana's Minister for Education, Dr. Matthew Opoku Pempra, underscored his country's commitment to the promotion of French as a second language during the signing in Paris of a linguistic pact between West African nation and the International Organization of Francophonie for improved technical support and capacity building for teaching and learning of French in Ghana. So if you don't know, Ghana really is kind of surrounded by Francophone countries, French-speaking African countries. These are the countries, FAL, we know we took a very strong position against France because these are the countries that basically are in a pact with France to this day to pay back a colonial debt, to make sure that I think it was like something like 65% of their money is put inside of the French central bank. Like there's a number of things that France requires of these countries. They can't have their military be independent of France because France has to basically agree to if they're going to go inside of a different country for war. Like there's a lot of different pacts, you know, that were created. So because of that, we took a very strong stance against France. Now, Ghana is a country that was colonized by England. And it's very interesting that now of all times, you know, why are they trying to connect with Francophone countries? So I'm gonna actually ask y'all because I couldn't find too many details of this. I think it's being kept under wraps for a reason. But do y'all know, is it just language that's the issue? Like, is it just that they're teaching French, or are they actually going to be having a similar setup as far as the colonial relationship between France and its former Francophone countries? Does anyone know the details of the agreement?
Everything I found, it just seemed like it was the language, and I mean it makes sense because when you check the map, you know, Ghana is surrounded by a Francophone country. So the impression I got was just, you know, Ghana was adopting this so that they could better communicate with neighboring countries. I didn't see it as Ghana trying to become part of the French sphere of influence in West Africa, and I hope that's not the case.
So I'll say my issue with this. You want to go, Frank? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Let me come in. You see, we have to look at it from every angle. And, you know, like Nkrumah said, in 1963 in Addis Ababa, when it had when the AU was funded, and in our conference, he said, you know, we shouldn't sleep. We shouldn't leave from here without one United States of Africa. We shouldn't sleep on the colonial master because the colonial master are not asleep. These people are awake 24/7, working around the clock. So we can't look at it from one angle. We should look at it from every other angle. And if you can permit me, let me give a history in 1 minute from 1884 to current time just in 1 minute. All right, in 1884, when the European decided to go to Africa after slavery had lost its ingredient in the Western world, they decided that, okay, you know what, the next place we can go now is to go back to Africa, to overtake Africa, to colonize Africa. But imagine, at that time, the European was already in Africa. They already know places where there were powerful king, where there were powerful warrior. So they already knew these places. So after they divided Africa among themselves and they went to Africa, they didn't go to the weak place. They went to the powerful area, the powerful kings, to try to take them down, to try to defeat them, to try to manipulate them, to go against other warrior, other great kings, other great warrior. And that's what they did. You see, so in order to succeed, in order to continue to exploit, you have to destabilize the powerful area first, because the weaker area, they will have nothing to do. It will be very easy to walk over them. So if you can destabilize the powerful area, you will succeed. The weakest area have nothing to do with it. So that's what they did. And then when they came to Africa, after they did that, and then it started coming to independent and all of those things. After they overtook Africa, they succeeded. And then after African nations started getting independent again, like for example, the DR Congo was a very if not mistaken, at that time the very first elected democratic nation in Africa. At that time, the United States and Europe went against the government in that country, a democratic elected nation or government. They still went against him. And they're talking about why? Because he was preaching against, not against, but he was preaching something in favor of the African or the Togolese, or let's say the Congolese, that was against the European or the United States, because they was no longer going to find a place to exploit. You see, and then other African nation was going to follow as well. So they would sit down there to see DR Congo succeed. So what they did, they went against the president, Patrick Lumumba, and killed him. You see, so in order to succeed, you have to destabilize. And then we saw it with Thomas Sankara. In fact, there was some FBI video that I watched, a documentary, and they were discussing on the reason why Thomas Sankara was killed. And there was one FBI director, and he said the reason why he was killed is because he was too aggressive. He was too aggressive. And after I listened to that video and I analyzed it, but if I had the power or the chance to really say with that FBI director, I would say to him, Thomas Sankara was not aggressive. He was impatient. He was impatient because he didn't want to sit and see his people go through another 400 years of captivity, another 600 years of slavery. So he wasn't aggressive. He was just impatient. So you see, so that's what been going on the continent. Whenever they see a powerful person coming, leader coming out, they go and destabilize that area. And we saw it with Muammar Gaddafi. When Muammar Gaddafi was doing everything again to bring Africa back to life, they went into Libya, they destabilized Libya, and they took out Muammar Gaddafi, they killed him. So now, coming back now to Ghana. Coming back now to Ghana, to just summarize it. Recent time, we've been seeing Ghana have been, the president of Ghana, Nana Addo, or Kofo Nana Addo, he has been one of the men who has been preaching, who has been talking about how Europe should leave Africa alone, how Europe should stop exploiting Africa. African can do for themselves. It is only African that can liberate Africa. It is only African that can develop Africa. And he been preaching this message. And other African leaders' eyes have been opening. African eyes have been opening. Ordinary African eyes have been opening. So he's really pushing this self-independent, this being self-productive, being self-reliance. He's really pushing it. And now Mind you, Ghana is at the center of Francophone nation, and he's really pushing this thing. So it's also opening other French nation to follow the same thing. You see what they are doing. And then in doing that, now the French have to come out to say, you know what? We have to do something. We saw when the French president was in Ghana, how the Ghanaian president put him in his place. And the Ghanaian president also brought that to the UN. He brought that same speech to the UN again. And he put the West and the UN and the European in their place. So, or in their places. So, I mean, he's preaching. So, right now, France is looking at it that, you know what? We have to do something. I think one of the things that we can do to close this Ghanaian president mouth, is we have to go in, to say, you know what, we want to make French a second language or a third language or whatsoever language here, a major language here. You see, and once that happens, what the Ghanaian will see themselves as a French, speaking nation or French-speaking people, and they feel that they will have free access to France and all those things, because this is an agreement they're going to bring to them. This is a flaw they're going to bring to them, that you're going to get access, to France and all those things, because Africa is hard, because our leaders are making it hard, and then our people will support it. But let us also know that the reason why French succeeded in Africa, there is something the French people brought called the French assimilation. The French assimilation means the French people kill all the African language to wheresoever they settle. They destroy the African language, they destroy their culture, and they bring in the French language, and they brought in the French language, and they brought in the French culture and impose it on the people. That's what they call the French assimilation. So we should also look at it from all angles, that this thing is a campaign that they're running, because the Ghanaian president is opening other African leaders. He's putting bravery in other African leaders to be brave and to come out to speak. So we should look at it from all angles as well.
Yeah,
So they are trying to destabilize Ghana in different way, not in war, but they are trying to destabilize Ghana, that they can control Ghana, for Ghana to keep their mouth closed, for Ghana, not to be exposing them, or for Ghana not to tell African, we can do it, we can be self-productive, we can do this. That's what they're trying to do as well.
Okay. Yeah, like my big issue with this especially is that, I think as African people, and I'm speaking on Africans on the continent of Africa, because I think at least Africans in America, like, we kind of have an understanding of slavery being this horrible thing that happened to us. But I think on the continent, there's not like a real real movement against what happened in colonialism. Like, there's not a lot of people who actually, it's one thing to say, okay, well, we want to be independent now, we want to have our own countries, but to actually look at what happened in colonialism as something that was a crime against humanity, as something that was a horrible evil that was brought upon the people, that's what I feel like is missing. Like, there's not a general consensus that colonialism actually destroyed Africa as being a continent that had livelihood, a continent that was wealthy. There's not a lot of general consensus on that. And I feel that way when you have, the African, Ghana president. And I could understand, like, the logic kind of behind it. Like, okay, we're surrounded by the French-speaking countries. But the question should be, like, you go to Europe, there's a lot of languages in Europe. You'll have England that's next to France, that's next to Germany, that's next to Italy. Like, they don't have any problem being around different countries speaking different languages. But for some reason in Africa, now this is an issue. I'm surrounded by Francophone countries, so this is going to be our second language. But if you were really, truly moved by what happened in colonialism, to me, you rather than take on the colonial language, you would be trying to undo what has happened in colonialism. And I really think that a lot of times with a lot of people in the continent, especially with the Black bourgeoisie over there, the sentiment that I get is that they're actually happy that Africa was colonized. I think a lot of Africans subconsciously really believe that Europe civilized them, that if it wasn't for Europe, where would we be? They really bought into that mentality. And so you don't see a lot of people trying to undo European civilization. When you look at the borders of Africa, all of these borders were drawn by Europeans. So, you know, you have people that are ride or die, like I'm ride or die Nigerian. I don't like any other, you know, African countries, blah, blah, blah. I'm ride or die Ghanaian. Like, you'll have these people that ride or die for this. And it's like, okay, I understand, like, you know, wanting to embrace where you've grown up. At the same time, understand that these are borders that were drawn by colonialism. English is a language. We weren't speaking English prior to colonialism. This is a language that has been forced upon our people. French is a language that has been forced upon our people. Yet you have people in Cameroon about to go a civil war against each other over colonial languages because, hey, you speak French, I think English is better. You speak English, I think French is better. You're fighting over colonial things that we have been implanted with. So that's, you know, that's really what I took away from this, you know. We really have to look at colonialism as serious as the Jews look at the Holocaust. Because if we were that serious about what happened to our people, the fact that we're still colonized, then we would be not trying to maintain these systems, maintain these languages, maintain the governments. A lot of the governments in Africa are governments that were passed down directly from colonialism. You're wondering why these governments and these constitutions are not going to represent your people. It's because these were things that were set up so that you could stay subjugated to European dominance. Yet we're not trying to undo our constitutions. We're not trying to undo the languages or take on, you know, I know Julius Malema, he's trying to get Swahili to be the continental language. If we're going to have a language that all of us speak, why not have an African language? And so that's, to me, like, I think African people, we don't have enough self-confidence in ourselves. We don't have enough love of ourselves to say, you know, this is what has been done to us. But moving forward, we want to actually promote African culture. We want to promote African languages, African people. So anyone else have anything else to say about this?
Yeah, let me just add to that quick. Let me just add to that and to give a warning to Ghana. Please, Ghana, you are very peaceful. You are a peaceful country. And right now, a lot of countries in Africa are looking at you and to follow your footstep. But you having a French as a second language or a third language is not going to benefit Africa. It's not going to benefit Ghana. We should see Cameroon as an example. Right now, the English and the French in Cameroon are having a dispute, are having conflict, and the British are sitting looking, and the French are sitting looking. They are not even saying nothing. And they were the one that caused this problem. Let us know this. In 1884, like I said before in one of our videos, Cameroon was a German colony up from 1884 up to 1916. And then that's the time in 1916, the French and the English got together. They took away the German. And then 3 years after, they divided Cameroon, where the French took 80 and the English took 20%. So we should, and then conflict now today, the French are sitting, they are not coming in to say, you know what, we created this problem, let's solve it, because it is in their interest for conflict to be among the Cameroonian so that they can focus on what the French are doing in the country by exploiting the country. It is in the interest of Queen Elizabeth or the Prime Minister to keep exploiting the Cameroonian so that they can focus on what the British are doing in Cameroon. So you gotta be mindful as African, as Ghanaian. Let us be mindful when these people are coming to us with policy that we're interested in and not in our interest. We should also look at history and be able to deny these people what they are bringing to us. We should also be able to look at our current condition in some of the African nations and also be able to deny these people on what they are bringing to us. That's just my addition.
Frank, you okay?
He might have dropped his phone.
Okay.
Yeah,
go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to, yeah, I completely agree. Like you broke it down It was perfect. I mean, because it's like we as Africans believe that we are better off because of slavery and being colonized, which is crazy when you think about it. But that's what brainwashing will do to you, and that's why before I think the last live stream we had, I tried to emphasize the solution. It's us, meaning basically we are rejecting any type of colonizers or white supremacists. Like, saying our war is not against anything else until we eliminate that first. Until we eliminate white supremacy and being colonized. Like, we can't even begin to start thinking about other things. Like, we haven't even got past that yet. And I mean, I feel like we do the same thing here in the States. It's like we have people arguing over voting for Democrats or Republicans, and haven't stopped to think that neither one is for us. Like, we are so busy trying to choose, we haven't even stopped to think, like, this is ridiculous. Like, neither one is going to help us. Like, they never have. Republican Democrats. Now we're gonna go back to Republicans and do that all over again. Then what's next? And I think brain, like, it's just been drilled into our minds, for generation after generation after generation. And to the point where now most of us just believe there's no other way. Like, we have to do it this way.
And that's a good point too. Like, as you said, there are, like, when I kind of hear certain people talk about, us being in America, you could tell, like, there's a lot of people who are happy that we're descended from slavery. Like, there's a lot of people who are happy that our ancestors were stolen from Africa, because otherwise we wouldn't be a part of this great American dream. So, I hear that sentiment on both sides. Dwayne, do you have anything to add to this conversation?
Yeah, I want to speak a little bit more about language and colonialism, because the other thing that happened recently as well, I don't know if you all saw, but the Prime Minister of Jamaica wants to make Spanish the second language in Jamaica, and his justification for that was the long mutually beneficial history that Spain and Jamaica has. Now, the history he's talking about is when the Spanish came to Jamaica, wiped out the indigenous people, and then brought the Africans over to enslave them. That's the beneficial history that he's talking about. But the first thing that came to my mind is Spain, and trying to establish relationships with Jamaica. Would Spain ever make Jamaican patois second language in Spain to establish relationships? So I'm noticing, like, as African people, both on the continent and even we're always quick to adopt other European languages, and you never see Europeans trying to adopt our languages or even our dialects. Even here in the United States, there's a big controversy over Ebonics. Most European people look down at Ebonics as being like a broken language, inferior language. So you don't find a whole lot of white people. They might adopt aspects of our slang, but you don't see white people rushing to adopt Ebonics. So we're always trying to adopt European languages, and I don't see Europeans trying to adopt our languages as well. And it's funny, I actually have this book sitting here, Yakola Lingala. It's a book I've written on Lingala, which is the language I'm learning, and I'm a big advocate for. I feel like as African people, we should at least familiarize ourselves with African languages, be able to speak at least one African language. And not only is it important to just reconnect to our culture and to restore our minds as African people. As you know, I'm a big proponent of restoring African minds, but what's interesting about African languages is once you start studying African languages, you start seeing certain concepts and terminology and phrases in those languages that don't even exist in European languages. For example, how African languages structure the family concept. You don't really find that in European languages. European languages aren't as well. First of all, European cultures aren't very family oriented, and that's reflected in language. African languages are a lot closer. To use Lingala as an example, in Lingala, the word for cousin and the word for sibling is the same word. So that shows you how close and tight knit we were as African people. So I would say it's important for us to learn African languages, just because it gives an insight into the type of societies and the type of people that we were before we were colonized and had these alien languages and this alien culture forced on us.
Absolutely. All right, so there's a comment that I like. Let me see if I can find it again. I might have lost it. One second. While I'm looking for that, anyone have anything to add? Okay, I think, no, that's not it. Well, the general.
Frank, are you back?
All right. Yeah, I'm back.
Okay, 1 moment. I'm almost there. I know I am.
Yeah, I think why you are looking for it, let me just add, like what Duan said. I think is a good example that Duan gave. I think we should be the one, Africans should be the one now telling the European, look, you have to learn our language. We should be the one now coming to America, coming to Europe, going to France and telling them, you have to learn our language. We should be the one now telling, oh, this is our language, you have to learn it. Then they're coming to us, still imposing the language. Or we should be the one telling them, you have to learn Swahili now. If you come to Africa, we're not going to speak French. If you come to Africa, you have to speak Swahili to all.
Absolutely. So, all right, final comment. So, and I can't pronounce the name, but it's something with a K, King. It says, we are working from the concept that whites are responsible for everything bad which has happened to us, when the reality is we have been our own biggest enemy. I think that is an easy thing to look at when you look at the problems on their face value. For example, when you look at things, let's just start here if you're in America. So we have a problem as far as power because we're not actually building up our own communities. So it might look like, okay, this is our problem because we're not investing in Black businesses. We're not telling our people to actually spend money in the Black community. Or if they say, the dollar in the Black community goes out of the Black community within minutes, whereas the Asian community will stay in, I think, for like 2 or 3 days or something like that. So these are problems. These are behaviors that we do. Same thing on the continent. Same thing in other places in the diaspora. You have these African leaders who are corrupt. You have these leaders who are selling the people out. And from the way it looks, it's the leaders, it's them who are doing things. But you have to look at it as why we've been wired to do these things. And I think Dr. Amos Wilson really broke it down very well, because we have to understand the way that he broke it down was that the way that the setup is for Africans versus Europeans. Think about, the setup, think about America, how disenfranchised we are. Think about when you go to Africa, the fact that these are people, African people on a continent, the richest continent in the world, that is the poorest continent as far as people. The people aren't benefiting from their own resources. They have allowed for Europeans to tell them with their resources.
I'm getting a lot of,
Oh, can you? Oh, okay. So when you look at the continent, as far as
I was trying to say, the mic is on feedback. I can't hear really what she's saying.
Okay, you're kind of in and out. I think your connection might be a little bad. Can you hear me? Is my connection good for everyone else? Okay, I think it's on your end here. So what I'm saying is, as far as how things go on the continent, in order for us to buy into this relationship where we don't have control of our own resources, we don't control our own politicians. Our politicians are really there to serve Europe. In order for us to buy into this relationship where we're constantly being taken advantage of the Democratic Party, all of the exploitation is going on, where we have a prison industrial complex where our people are literally in slavery to this day, and yet many of us go on about our day and forget completely about that. In order for us to buy into that, where whites are on top benefiting from us, and we are on the bottom constantly being exploited, constantly being slaves to them, it is absolutely necessary that we be in a state of insanity. There's no sane person, no sane people would allow these things to happen. So when we say that, we're looking at other people, there's other people who want us to be in a state of insanity. All these behaviors that I just listed, they are not behaviors that are innate in us. These are behaviors that have been taught to us, things that have been manipulated as far as our consciousness, from the media, from school, from the education system. When you think about the purpose of the education system, they're not teaching you to be an independent, self-reliant people. They're teaching you to be a slave to the white master. They're not teaching you to look at your continent, Africa, and actually embrace the continent. If you're in Africa, the colonial education is not teaching you to question European dominance on the continent. They're teaching you to allow things to continue to be dormant, to not actually want things to change. So all of these things, these mentalities are all being manipulated and all being implanted into us by our white oppressor. And although it started off with white Europeans, now you have other people taking advantage of it, as in China. So yes, we do have personal responsibility. We do personally have to wake up. We have to wake up from this trance we've been in. We have to wake up. I would actually say it's a coma. We have to get out of this coma, and we have to strategize and actually deny the European, the European mindset that has been given to us. We have to actually come out against it. But we also have to understand these are all these behaviors that are self-destructive, all these behaviors that are going to always hold our people back. They have been absolutely taught to us, and there are people who benefit from it, and the same people that benefit from it are the same people that taught these behaviors to us. Anyone else have anything to add?
Yeah, let me come in to add to that. You know, you just make a very good point about, you know, the history, you know, that are being given to us. You know, let me first say this. Every history in the system, every history that we learn today are white history, because it is written in such a way that never benefit us. You see, and we think it's not white history because it is not being named as white history. It is already white history. That is the only history that you will learn, you know, that will make you a conscious person, that will make you to understand that, you know, you are not the problem to yourself, unless you really read Black history. It have to be something called Black history. You see, but every other history, every other textbook that you learn to primary or all the way to colleges, they are all white history. Not because you're not seeing it on a white, you know, you think that it's not white, but like that clause white is not there. But when you say history, it means his history or their history. But they just call it short. They don't want to say in a white history, because now if this is white history, it's going to make you think that why is it called white history, or why is it called white history? Then why there is no Black history? And see, but to eliminate that, they will tell you white history. For example, and the reason why I say that is that there is no book, there is no textbook that will empower Black that you will see it being taught in colleges in the United States here. You won't see it. If you see a book that is written by the Black man that is being taught in any university or in any school here in the United States or even elsewhere, it's because that book have put the white man as the hero. You see, or the white race as the hero, and make the Black man to think of the white man as the savior, to think of the white man as the superior. You see, that's the only way you will see that book being taught. But more, if you enter in school, most of the author you see, they are all white author. You don't really see Black author. So what does that tell you? It's called white history. You see it? And when we learn these things, we apply it in a way that we perceive it. You see, so when you say, you know, we are the problem to ourselves, we are not really the problem. The system that educates us is the problem, because the system gave us the wrong education. The system gave us the wrong textbook. You see, and we imply those things that don't benefit us. You see, so to answer your question, it's not really us. It's the system, the book that we learn, the textbook that we learn from is not a textbook that benefit or a look at, you know, us to look at other race, you know, as the way it is in the book. Not because it's not called white history means that, you know, it is but when you analyze it, it's actually called white history, because it is written by the white man, it is approved by the white man, it is approved by the university who teaching it, and all those things. They are all white author, and they wrote it in a way that will benefit them.
Absolutely. Anyone have anything to add? All right, I think we're done for the night. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and you will see us probably in about 2 weeks with a new broadcast. So again, if you're interested in joining FAL and you're on the chat, I did put a link somewhere in the early part of the chat to our membership application, and I'll also pin another link as well as our membership requirements. So thanks everyone for tuning in tonight, and you all have a blessed night.